In tonight's Dateline Defense Fudging the Truth, the Pentagon's Inspector General is investigating complaints that analysts with the Defense Intelligence Agency may have altered reports on ISIS. So what was the goal? To make it seem like the U.S. mission against the terrorist group is actually making progress. For more, we turn to our guest tonight on Capitol Insider. It's retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, decorated combat veteran, author, Ph.D., and Executive Vice President of the BURKE-MACGREGOR Group. Welcome, Colonel.
Hey.
Now, a recent report says that 50 intelligence analysts with the U.S. Central Command support a complaint that some DIA information was altered to make it seem more favorable to the public. What's your take on these allegations? Do you think they're true? Does this surprise you at all?
First, I'm certain they're probably true, and secondly, I'm not at all surprised. This is a common occurrence. We've been dealing with this for a very long time, particularly in the 1960s with the start of the Vietnam War. We had lots of what I would call happy talk reports that came filtering back. People need to understand the analysts who do this work are professionals. They do excellent work. They are not to blame. Their work is frequently changed, revised to sound better, more palatable to their political masters. And the problem really starts at the top. If this goes on, it's not because someone in the middle decided on his or her own initiative to do it. It started because probably someone in the White House at a very high level was unhappy with what was coming up there and made it clear they wanted to hear something else.
What about the checks and balances on this system? If it goes to the top levels here, how can they be accountable, and how do we actually find out the truth here?
Well, unfortunately, it's very difficult to find out the truth unless a whistleblower stands up and says something, and we know what happens to most whistleblowers. They end up being hanged for their trouble, and no one on the Hill comes to their aid, or rarely does. So you've got to have a Congress that's interested in the truth and is willing to fight for the truth and demand the truth, holds hearings to get at the truth. And let's be frank, we haven't had very much of that. So if Congress doesn't take the lead on this, the executive branch is not going to be forthcoming.
All right, we want to switch gears right now. On Thursday, the multinational nuclear agreement with Iran will go into effect. Many on the right have called this a terrible plan, but you've been a supporter of a deal since the beginning. So what do you think the naysayers are? Why are they so intent on derailing this agreement?
You know, I think a great deal of money and resources were mobilized to make this deal fail. The various organizations, not just the Israeli-American or American-Israeli Political Action Committee, but its associates, affiliates, and many others banded together with a great deal of cash, contacted all of their friends, associates, everywhere in the media, in industry, business, and so forth, and tried very hard to stop it. I think they've been misguided, frankly, because I don't think that what they are saying is accurate. I think they're alarmist. But now I think they're bitter and angry because this massive effort has failed. And I'm sure tremendous pressure is exerted from Mr. Netanyahu to somehow or another retrieve this failure from the ash heap of history. But I think it's pretty clear that this agreement is going to go through.
Well, there are still people who are optimistic about the deal actually happening. They're hoping for relief from oppressive economic sanctions here. Still, some are unsure of what that does mean for the relationship with the U.S. Does this kind of a deal open the door for better relations, or do we still have a long way to go here?
We have a long way to go, but this is a first step. And there are lots of reasons for Iran to have a good relationship with the United States, and there are lots of reasons for the United States, along with its European allies, to do business with Iran. The issue is overcoming decades of mutual mistrust, suspicion, misunderstanding. But you've got a population in Iran that's very interested in re-entering the international system. We want to see Iran behave as a status quo actor, not as a terrorist state and not as an irritant. And I think we also are beginning to see that we and they share some of the same apprehensions, same concerns, and same enemies.
So let's talk about mixed messages that we see coming out of the country. Iran's president wished the Jewish people a happy new year as they celebrate Rosh Hashanah. But last week, the supreme leader said Israel would not even exist in 25 years. So which one is the true tone of Iran?
Well, remember that Khrushchev in the 1950s, who used to bang his shoe on the table at the United Nations, told the American people that the Soviet Union would bury us. I wouldn't be too concerned about the principal mullah and what he has to say. I think he is giving expression to a feeling that he and his fellow mullahs may share, but quite frankly, I think the president of Iran is making a statement that resonates with the population, because the population is not interested in going to war with Israel, the United States, or anybody else.
All right, Colonel, before we let you go, we want to talk really briefly about the migrant crisis in Europe. You know, everybody's seen these stunning images and video. We've seen the steady flow of people fleeing the war-torn Middle East in search of refuge in the EU. The influx of people flaring tensions, causing support for a German right-wing party that backs tough immigration policies to gain support. So Germany's been very accepting of the migrants, but if political favor starts to slide, are we going to see a change in the tune? What happens then?
Well, there are a couple of things. First, remember that the Saudis, the Emirates, the various wealthy, let us say, American oil protectorates in the Persian Gulf have not offered to help any of these people. In fact, they are encouraging these migrants to go into Europe. The Saudis contacted the British government and said, we'll be happy to build a mosque for every 100 Muslims that migrate into Great Britain. I think there is the view inside the Middle East that this economic migration to Europe could play a role in turning Europe into an Islamic state at some point. I'm not saying that'll happen, but I think that in the backs of the minds of many people in the Middle East, that's very real. At the same time, in Germany and in the rest of Europe, frankly speaking, remember the populations, the electorates, have never been consulted. No one asked them whether or not they wanted millions of these Muslims to pour into their countries. And quite frankly, the answer to that question is no. The overwhelming majority of Europeans don't want any more. Remember, the Germans already have several million Turks and Kurds in their country that are there legally to work. They live in separate communities, and their problems are rather considerable. The police in Germany are afraid in many cases to go into some of these Turkish settlements, to the point where they would like to have Turkish police from Istanbul and other cities in Turkey come and deal with the Turks in Germany. So now you're asking people to bring in more Muslims. At the same time, you've got an enormous problem with the German welfare state. They frankly can't really afford to continue to pay people lavishly who come there to live. Just imagine you show up from the Middle East, from Syria, and you are immediately handed 150 euros. You are given an apartment to live in that you don't have to pay for. You don't have a job, and you are given the equivalent of food stamps to go out and purchase whatever you need to live. This is not a permanent, steady state solution. This is welfare on a scale that we can't even imagine. And the Germans are saying, wait a minute, there is no incentive for these people to ever go home. And these people do not have the education, they don't have the skills to assimilate. They're not really interested in assimilating. They're Muslims. They have a different agenda. So I think we're going to see over the next year more and more explosive backlash inside European countries against the infusion of these Muslim refugees.
All right, we're going to have to watch that unfold. Thank you very much, retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the BURKE-MACGREGOR Group. Thanks for your time, sir.
Thank you.